Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm really excited for this guest that I have on. He has an amazing story and the journey that he's on right now to really spread the message for dads and help them really connect with their kids is really inspiring. And I'm super excited to have him on to talk about it. But my good friend Blake Brewer has joined me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Bryan, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, man. I hope everything's going good out there in Southern California.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, cool. Thank you again for being on, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because you're on this kind of this mission right now, and I really like the mission that you're on. Very similar, in my message with dads, on the podcast, but you have this other mission that we're going to talk about. But for my viewers, listeners who don't know who you are, let's dive into a little bit of a backstory because I know there's a little bit of a story there and I want to
Yeah.
talk about it and hear your experiences going through it. But let's start from the beginning. Kind of how you grew up, the things you got into, and then what led you to the path that you're on now. And obviously, this is a dad podcast, so I want to know about your kids as well.
Yeah, so I've got three kids, 7, 5, and 2. Amazing wife, Amanda, and man, we're just making it happen over here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Love being took my son to the baseball game this weekend, minor league baseball game, and it was the first time we'd ever been just me and him like
Oh, that's
together
cool.
to a game, and it was just, man, I told my wife, I was like, my heart was full. Like, I don't know what, something I'd always dreamed of this moment, just me and him at the baseball game. We just bonded. But growing up, grew up in Dallas, pretty typical average American family, mom, dad, sister, brother. Like, I had really good parents, good family. Played sports growing up. Football, baseball were my main sports. And then I'm gonna dive into my story. Is that all right? That kind of got me on this mission.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was a freshman over at the University of Arkansas, and my mom called me and she said, Blake, we're going to go on a family vacation to Hawaii. I said, heck yeah, let's go. And first day that we were there, we were out in the water, just me and my dad. My sister and brother and my mom were on the beach. And Bryan, I gotta tell you, as my dad were out and I were out there snorkeling, there's nowhere else in the world that I wanted to be than right there with my dad. I'd just been away at college. You think about my high school years, I'd been hanging out with my buddies. It's not like me and my dad had just like spent a ton of time together. And then here I am out in the water with him, and it just felt good, like all was right in the world. And so my dad, he was a hospital administrator. Long before I was born, he was a football player, so he'd been drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. His main claim to fame, though, is he was Terry Bradshaw's tight end at Louisiana Tech. And so they were best friends and roommates. And man, there's so many great stories out of that. I actually interviewed Bradshaw for something called the Great Dad Challenge a couple months ago. And he told a bunch of stories about him and my dad. It was really fun to
That's
do
cool.
that. But my dad was really humble. So he hardly ever told anyone that he was Terry Bradshaw's tight end. Um, I told everybody. It was my claim to fame growing up. So there we are out in the water, and we just kept going further and further out. And the next thing I know, it got pretty deep, and the current had really picked up, and the waves had gotten really big. And I realized I didn't know where my dad was.
Mm.
And so I slightly panicked. I'm scanning the water, looking for him, where'd he go, where'd he go? And eventually I saw him. And I remember thinking, oh, good, there's my dad. Except it wasn't good because my dad was struggling, and I could see it in his eyes. He looked right at me, and then he began to yell for help. And my dad had this really big, deep, booming voice, but his yell for help was more like this soft whimper. And so I swam to him as quickly as I could. By the time I reached him, he was underneath the water, and
Mm.
so he was unconscious. I dove down. I wrapped my arms around my dad. I brought him back up to the surface. And then I had to get him to the shore as quickly as I could. I started swimming. And honestly, about the point that I wasn't going to make it anymore, a nearby snorkeler showed up and helped me get my dad to shore. The lifeguards did show up. They got him on a surfboard, took him in, and they started doing CPR to my dad. And as I'm sitting there next to my dad, I did the only thing I knew to do, which is just cry out to God. God, would you please save my dad's life? And I really thought that at any moment he was going to come to. that it was going to be like the movies where he kind of flickers his eyes open and the water comes out of his mouth. It never happened. And
Mm.
so my dad ended up drowning. And it went from one of the best moments of my life to the worst, just in a matter of minutes. I'm sitting there next to my dad's body on the beach. Like, what the heck just happened? Like, we were just out in the water having the time of our life, and now my dad is gone forever. And I was already asking myself some questions like, how are we about to make it without my dad? How am I going to make it without my dad? So, fast forward a couple hours, and we're back in the condo. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed in the back bedroom, still just in total shock. And my mom appeared in the doorway and she said, Blake, I found something in your dad's briefcase, something that I know he was going to give you on this trip. I had no idea what she was talking about, but she walked across the room and she handed me a letter from my dad.
Mm.
And as I began to read this letter, it was as if my dad was right there. His voice, I could hear it. And that letter was just everything I needed. I felt so much hope just by reading this letter. I felt a sense of peace come over me. And then I just felt so loved. Like Bryan, do not tell me that my dad didn't love me. My dad took the time to put down on paper how he felt about me, to share some wisdom, share our family values. Uh, as I get to the last line of this letter, I really believe only God could allow my dad to write this. And my dad was a man of faith. And my dad wrote, as you're being faithful to the Bible, you're often going to find yourself in the minority here on earth. But I can assure you that in heaven, you'll be in the majority. Love you, dear old dad. I remember
Mm.
reading that and thinking, man, I'm going to see my dad. I had that hope. And so I really cannot imagine my life without this letter. You know, I really believe that we are the stories that we tell ourselves. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of stories that I could have told myself about that. Uh, you know, one of them was, and I never experienced survivor's guilt, but I over that next year, as I was grieving really hard almost every night, I was laying in bed, just crying myself to sleep and reliving that day. And at times I would think, man, could I have done something different? Could I have gotten to my dad faster? Could I have swam with him different? Like, was this my fault that we had never gone out that far, maybe? And anytime I had the thought like that, it was like my dad's voice was right there. Like, this wasn't your fault.
Mm.
I never experienced survivor's guilt. And really, at the end of the next 12 months, I had some professional counselors tell me, like, Blake, you grieved this really well compared to most people. And I look at those 12 months, and as I was feeling a lot of pain, I could have easily tried to numb out that pain with drugs or alcohol. I didn't. I didn't go to any of that stuff. And honestly, more than any other 12 months in my life, I grew more as a person and a leader. And I can only attribute this to my dad's letter and the words that he wrote. And he allowed me to write a story about those events, that my dad loved me, that my dad was there for me, was always going to be there for me. He gave me something, an incredible gift. He gave me, it was more than just this letter. He gave me his voice. He gave me more of himself. He gave me the words that I needed. And I'm just so grateful that he did that for me.
Mm. Um, gosh. First, let me just, say my condolences to you losing your dad at that time. It sounds like you had a very strong, loving relationship with your parents and with your dad in particular. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. You know, my dad really was my hero. Now I can look back and I can, you know, as now that I'm a dad, I'm absolutely, there's things I'm trying to improve upon. My dad was more of an introverted type guy. And so there's things that I'm trying to be more vocal with my
Mm-hmm.
children. Um, and yeah, but you know, one of the things that has probably been the hardest thing for me, you know, that was 20 years ago, is now that I'm adult, I feel like I just missed out on that adult relationship with my dad. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of always had the kid relationship with my dad. And so now and I have it with my mom, and it's awesome. But every time, when I got married, kind of these big events, I got married, and my first child was born, and now like I have three, and now they're playing sports. I'm like, man, I just want to pick up the phone and call my dad and talk to him
Mm.
about it. And so, the grieving process goes on. It's different than the year after he died, but uh, all that being said, one of the things early on, and I think my dad allowed me to do this, is I just got really grateful for the dad that I had, because so many people don't have a good dad or don't know their dad. And God never promised that my dad was going to live to be 70, 89 years old. So I had a great dad for 19 years of my life. And then I also got to this point where I was not only grateful for my dad, I was grateful for my dad's death, which is, I don't know if some
Yeah.
people will never be able to understand that. It doesn't mean that I don't miss my dad. It doesn't mean I wish he hadn't have died, but I was able to be just grateful for his death, and the things that it opened up my eyes to some things, and just my perspective on life changed, that my life purpose changed because of it. And so I think having a grateful attitude, has really been life changing for me.
Mm. Now you have three kids now, and through the memory, and we're going to get into legacy, but through the legacy that your dad kind of left you with, now you have three kids. Has it changed your perspective on fatherhood? Just going through that experience with your dad, has that changed your perspective on how you parent your kids?
Yeah, it's interesting because my dad died when I was 19, so I wasn't even thinking about fatherhood at that
Right.
point. So I don't know what my perspective would be on fatherhood if that event had not happened. I can say that where I am now is that I think the greatest calling that I have in my life is to my family. One of the things that my dad wrote about was just be faithful to the responsibilities that you have in front of you. And so the greatest responsibility I have is to my children, and to my family, and to my wife. And so one of the things that I've learned is that when I am faithful to those responsibilities, it's not always easy, like it's hard,
Right.
you know, but there's so much joy on the back end of it, the more faithful I am. And so, I have to think that because of that event, and, my dad's letter and all that, that's absolutely shaped who I am today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes when people go through traumatic experiences like that, we begin to question, or we can begin to question our faith and question, the whys. And we don't know this until it happens, or maybe it directs us into a certain calling. But God works behind the scenes, right? And there's a reason behind certain events that happen in our lives. And for you and the mission that you're on now, I really think that was the reason. I mean, there was a deeper calling that God wanted you to follow, that He had a plan for you specifically, Blake. And yes, as traumatic as it was, and as something you didn't want to happen and never foresaw happening, but you wanted that relationship with your dad. And now this legacy that you're on now, you still get to have that relationship with your father, just passing on kind of the tradition of the letter. Is remarkable. So I want you to talk about that a little bit, because I think it's super important for people to hear this mission that you're on now, and really the reason why you're doing it.
Yeah, so I'm on a mission to help a million dads write at least one well-written, meaningful, lasting legacy letter, like my dad did for me. So I never could have imagined in a million years this is what I'd be doing, even in the years after my dad had passed away. Like if you had told me that this would be the mission I'd be like, heck no. Like I would have
Right.
turned it like, no way. That would have been too scary. But 3 years ago, when my children were younger, there I am, young dad. I talked about being faithful to the responsibilities. I want to be a good dad. What should I do? I know what I'll do. I'll write them a letter. If anyone knows the value of a letter from their dad, it's me. So I go to write him this letter, and I'm looking at a blank sheet of paper, and I'm like, what the heck am I about to write?
Right.
And it was really daunting. and really overwhelming. And so I took some time to write this letter. During this process of writing the letter, I did a lot of research to really try to understand what my kids need from me, what words they need from me. I know that the words that I speak over them and say to them matter, and my conviction really grew for that. The more research I did, and really I knew my dad's letter was powerful in my life, and maybe I didn't understand and have a full understanding of the why. But through this research, I was like, man, I really believe the most powerful voice spoken on the planet is the Father's voice. I mean, there are things that I could say to my children today that could absolutely wreck their life.
Hmm.
Um, and you could say, Bryan, those same things to my kids, and it might hurt their feelings a little bit, but they're not going to need some counseling to get over it
Right.
if you say, but they will if I say it. And man, I shudder to even think about accidentally saying some of these things.
Mm.
But on the flip side, there are things that I can say to my children that can bring confidence into their life, that can help them be more resilient, help them be more successful, reach their full potential. So as I'm writing this letter, I'm like, those words need to be in this letter. And so when I finished it, man, I have to say, I felt pretty amazing. Like I knew I had created something of value for my children. And then also I realized as I wrote this letter, hey, I was doing this for my kids, but really this was for me,
Right.
because it helped me think through the vision that I have for my family. What do I want to be true 10, 20 years from now? It just really slowed life down. And then it helped me know my children on a deeper level. And so when I finished, I decided to go ahead and give it to my kids. I read it to my daughter, Gracie Kate, and I shared this on the Today Show a couple months ago. I said, Gracie Kate, Daddy's got something for you tonight. And normally I'm reading her a princess book or something, but that night I
Right.
put this letter. And man, Bryan, it was just, she'd never seen me cry before. And
Mm.
man, I just let it go. I couldn't even help it, man. I'm just like, boohooing all over myself over here. And I get to the end of the letter and I have no idea what she's thinking, but I look up at her and she looks right at me and she says, Daddy, will you read me the princess book now? Yeah, I read her that princess book. But man, the next night she went up to my wife and she said, last night Daddy read me a message. Can he read me that message again tonight?
Oh, that's cool.
And so my daughter, she didn't understand all the concepts in that letter, but she got the main one. She's got a daddy who loves her. In the same way that my dad helped me write a story about my life and about
Hmm.
him, I'm helping to write a story for my children that they've got a daddy who loves them, who believes in them, who's proud of them. They don't have to do anything to earn my love. And so that story is going to shape the rest of their life. But it was really through that process that I came to the conclusion and that I've got to help more people get a letter like this from their dad. And part of it was there's two different guys a month apart, a guy named Victor Marks and a guy named Pete Vargas, share with me how they had received a letter from their dad, a life-changing letter from their dad. They didn't know my story at all.
Mm.
And so it was just like it was like a light bulb moment.
Wow.
And so I dropped everything. I told my wife, this is what we're doing. And we created a mission, created a business around that mission. And so I knew early on it was not going to be enough. Like we're never going to get to 1 million dads just by inspiring people to write the letter. But then also, so we've got to create a program and a process to really help dads write this letter. Because one of the things that, over the last 20 years, I meet people all the time and I tell them my story. Like long before I was even doing this, I'd tell them my story. And people would tell me, man, I wish I had a letter like that from my dad, like
Hmm.
over and over again. Um, and every once in a while, I'd meet someone else or meet someone who would say, "Oh, I got a letter like that from my dad
Mm.
too." And it's like we were in this special club together. Like I got a letter from my dad
Right.
club. But I learned when I wrote my letter, there's a reason that most people don't have a letter like this from their dad. And then also, our process is really more than just a letter. I think letters are great. I write, little notes and things like that to my children, but we're really helping dads write a legacy letter. So one singular document that has everything that their children need from them. And so that's we're this is what we've been doing the last 3 years, helping dads write this legacy letter.
And how have you found that? I mean, I know it's been rewarding, and actually probably helped you heal a bit from the experience that you had with your own father. It's that's part of the healing process. How have you found the response to having to help dads write these letters through your platform?
Man, it's been unbelievable. Like I love getting the stories from dads. There was a dad not too long ago. He gave it this letter. He's a CEO of a company. We partnered with him to help him and his employees write this legacy letter. And he gave it to his daughter on Valentine's Day. And so, like, what a cool letter to get. She's 20 years old. She gets this letter from her dad, and she loved it. But then it was a few months later, she wrote him a letter, and she said, "Dad, you will never know how much that letter meant to me. It was as if God Himself was writing those words. No, not only is our relationship better, but every single relationship I have in my life is better because of the letter you wrote me." So the backstory was is that her boyfriend had broken up with her a couple days before.
Oh, wow.
And so she was hearing all kinds of voices. Am I good enough? Am I lovable? She was starting to tell herself a story that was going to be pretty detrimental.
Hmm.
And then her dad comes in with this letter, cuts through all the noise, and he won her heart. And that's one of the things that we're helping dads do because our parents, our children are begging us, like, Dad, come win my heart. So the things that we're putting in this letter, we're helping dads apologize, communicate, I love you, unconditional love, I'm proud of you, not for what you've done, but for who you are. I believe in you. Help dads come up with special memories, and then share some advice as well. And so yeah, we
That's
get stories
cool.
like that all the time.
That's really cool. Now, when it comes to the letter, I know that you read this letter from your dad after he passed. Um, it sounds like that's not necessarily the condition of the legacy letter, based on some of the stories that you just shared. This sounds like a letter that you would really write, that you could present to your child, even being here on Earth. You can present to your child in person, and I'm sure that there's I'm sure that there's stages. Like you could write multiple letters, depending on their age and all that kind of stuff. How does that process work?
Well, you're absolutely right. My dad was going to give me that letter that weekend. Like he knew
Oh,
his
he was,
19-year
yeah.
old son needed that letter, needed those words, and I did. The truth is, I needed that letter even sooner. I think back to my seventh grade year. I was a pretty insecure seventh grader. I'm like, I think I could have used that letter looking back. And so, I encourage all parents to write this and give this letter as soon as possible because if our children are not currently in a situation, they're about to be in one, they've got a storm coming their way, maybe they have an opportunity that's in front of them or around the corner, maybe there's a temptation that's coming up that could totally derail them. And I know that whatever situation is coming, they're better off with these words than without
Hmm.
them. And so if I had it my way, every newborn in our country would have a letter written like this, then in their elementary school years, then in their junior high years, because all these you're growing, you're becoming more of yourself, and there's different things going on in your life, and so this letter can play a part in all of that in your high school years, when you move out of the house, when you get married, and then when you have kids. Like if I had it my way, like everyone would get a letter during all those times. And for one, you never know when that letter that you write is going to be the last one. Um,
Hmm.
you know, for all I know, my dad was going to write me another one in a few more years. He didn't know. He had no idea that he was about to die. I mean, I'm so glad he didn't wait a couple more months to write the letter.
Right.
Um, and so, but I meet dads at all stages. Like there are dads who sign up and write their letter with us that are like new dads. I see a lot of dads like in the teenage years who are starting to feel for the first time, maybe distance from their
Hmm.
children. And then a lot when their children are moving out of the house because they're like, oh man, they're moving out and they're really like, they're not with me. But your words can still be with them. Your voice can still be with them. And then there's a lot of older dads that are like, I was helping an 80-year-old dad a couple weeks ago, writing to his 54-year-old son. And this dad had a lot of regrets. He was an alcoholic the first 14 years of his son's life. And so he just wanted to make sure his son knew that he was sorry. And, there's not a wrong age to write this letter. Like, I meet people all the time who are like, especially in their 50s and 60s, they're like, man, I would do anything to have a letter like this from my dad. There was a mom recently, her husband was writing the letter, and she said, this is awesome that you're doing this for our children. I would give my right arm to have this letter. Her dad had recently died, and they're like going through all the stuff in the house. Like, surely there's something written down somewhere, and there wasn't. And it was really hard. His death was really hard. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like, the letter is impactful now, but I tell dads, like, the second you die, like, the letter will become that much more valuable because there's nothing else coming after that, and they know it.
Right. Wow. And you're, gosh, I'm just, I commend you for not only dealing with the grieving that you were dealing with as a young man, right? Who really had his whole world ahead of him, to really go through that and not resort to, falling on to, drugs or alcohol or any of those kinds of things, but to really find a deeper and bigger calling through the letter that your dad wrote you, and now to share that experiences with other dads and really help them maybe through a healing process. Maybe they are a dad that wants to be a great dad, but they just don't have a really deep connection or bond with their kids. That letter can really help change the trajectory of the family history. And so I think it's really remarkable and just a testament to your dad, who was a good man and knew something that he wanted. One thing that he wanted to do for his son was to write this letter and really share it with them. So I commend you for the mission that you're on now, and I think it's remarkable. And I hope that you get to that millionth dad, and then you can keep going from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have this big mission in front of us, and I really believe that God, if He wanted to, could make it happen next week. Um, there's some things that could happen where it could go by. I don't know. It could happen. It might happen after I die. I don't know. I would say that I don't measure my success by how many letters are written. My success comes from just being faithful to my calling, being faithful to my responsibilities, as my dad talks about, being faithful to my family, being faithful to the people that are in front of me, like the people that are ready to write their letter right now. Man, that's my job, is to help them write this letter. One of the guys that I got to help was a guy named Jeff Teagues. He's retired Delta Force, and he brought together a bunch of other guys that he was in the military with, and I got to help these guys. It was so cool. My dad was really patriotic, and so I was like, man, my dad would love to see this. Well, he finishes his letter, real proud of it. He gives it to his sons on Christmas morning. Now, when dads give their letters, sometimes it's like at a time of the year when they would give a gift, like a birthday, but like I mentioned, Valentine's Day, Christmas, but it doesn't have to be. Some dads just give it at a kind of a random time. But his 22 and 24-year-old sons open this up Christmas morning, and let's just say they weren't expecting to get a letter for
Right.
Christmas, and they're like, okay, a letter, like I don't know if they thought they were getting some new technology or something, but he said, hey, just go home and read it. And so they read it, and they came back the next day, and Jeff said they gave him like a little bro hug and said, hey, thanks for the letter, Dad. And he was thinking, that's all they're gonna say? Like, I poured my heart and soul into this thing, and all they're going to say is, thanks for the letter, Dad. Well, he said, I didn't press it. 6 months go by. He gets a call from his buddy, and his buddy says, hey, Jeff, I was just hanging out with your son, and your son said that you wrote him a letter this past Christmas. Your son said it's his most treasured possession, and that
Wow.
he reads it every single week, sometimes multiple times a week. Jeff had no idea.
Hmm.
And so, as someone who lived in a different state, he was going to that letter for a source of confidence. Whether he was having a great week or having in the middle of a storm, like his dad was speaking to him. And that's the power of this letter. because you can go back and read it over and over and over again. No matter, I read my dad's letter now, and there's things I read it now that just hit me different. I'm like,
Hmm.
man, I didn't even see that the first time. But now I get it different. I'm in a different stage of life now that I have kids, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I needed that right then. And no one can ever, like when every relationship is built on trust and clear communication. So no one can ever put words in my mouth. I can't ever make up a story and put words in my dad's mouth because I know exactly, like he was so clear in the letter, like this is how I feel about you, and so this is what we're doing. This is the power of the legacy letter.
That's awesome. I want to ask you one more question before I let you go. I know we're running short on time, but um, when it comes to, maybe challenges that dads are going through with their kids, knowing that this letter can help, what advice would you give to dads out there that may be going through a challenging or turbulent, period with their own kids? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I've as I go through challenges with my kids,
Hmm.
and I can even imagine, as they get older, they're going to experience, different things. There's moments where I uh, feel like, man, like I don't feel close to my kids, and or they're saying things that I'm like, oh man, like why are they saying that? And so what I try to do is I try to take ownership of the situation. Like I know that they're their own people and they make their own mistakes, but I'm like, what could I be doing? What do I need to do? I want to own this. And so part of that is leaning in and connect, like trying to connect with them on a deeper level, like me going one on one with my kids, or to try to have a conversation with them. I try to have grace on my kids. I can tell you that I've not done that perfectly all the time. There's a lot of
Right.
times where I get angry and I'm like, and I want to say, man, you should be acting like this. Um, and and then I just have to step back and say, like, I'm not perfect. I make
Hmm.
mistakes. Like, why should I be expecting this of them? They're just trying to figure out life as well. And so part of that is, whatever they just told me or whatever issues going on. So just really trying to be really understanding,
Hmm.
and really being on their team. Like
Yep.
to come alongside them. Hey, we're in this together. I'm going to help you figure this out. I understand you might be mad at me right now, but I just want you to know, hey, I am for you. I love you, and we're going to figure this out. And so, I think that's what I would tell.
Yeah.
There's so many different situations out there,
Right.
but I see a lot of dads doing that and leaning in more, like really love it, like love your kids more, go in deeper.
Yeah. Um, I love that you said giving your kids grace. Listen, kids they're they're not fully developed right yet, right? They're still trying to figure this thing out called life. And when they do something or make a mistake, it's one of those things that we can do as parents to help encourage them or guide them, is just allowing them to have grace and letting them um, deal with the situation as best they can, but knowing that we are right alongside them. That was a message that I told my boys all the time. Is that my boys are, they played a lot of sports. So I always use the team analogy. I said, hey, I'm on your team. And whatever it is that you're doing or did, just know that I'm on your team and I'm going to help you through it. Now, that's not to say that I won't be disappointed in the decision or something that you may have done or didn't do, but just know that I'm on your team. And my boys always knew that. And that was one of my greatest senses of accomplishment for my wife and I both, that we knew that our boys could come talk to us when they were struggling with something or going through something. They could come and talk to us, and we wouldn't just, get mad or get upset. We would help them through it. So that is a great message to share with dads.
Well, as you were talking, another thought I have is just really reframing the situation. And so anytime that there is a situation or something going on, it's like, instead of being frustrated or mad, it's like, no, this is an opportunity.
Right.
This is an opportunity for me to show my kids how much I love them, to help train them or teach them. My kids are still young, so they're definitely in this more teaching and training mode. So, So really, I think just reframing it as an opportunity. Whatever the situation is, it's an opportunity, and it might hurt. There might be some pain, but man, there's going to be some good that comes out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, Blake, for my listeners, viewers, want to learn a little bit more about you, maybe check out the thing that you're doing with the legacy letter. Where's the best places for them to do that?
Yeah, you can go to legacyletterchallenge.com/dad up. And we've got a free guide there. You can download the free guide. And then really the best way I can help anyone write their legacy letter is if you sign up for the master class. And so we're helping dads go through that every month. And then if you're a business owner, or if you've got clients, we've got people that give our program as a gift. And really, it's a great way to express how much you care about somebody. Hey, I'm going to help you write this letter to your kids. And so
Awesome.
I love partnering in that way.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes, but I know you have to run, but I want to say thank you for the mission that you're on now. Thank you for the things that you're doing to help inspire other dads. And, that's one of the things that we can do as fathers is help encourage other fathers. And you're doing it through this mission. So I'm super proud of not only you, but also the mission that you're on to help other dads. And I'm really grateful that you took the time to be on the show. And I'm looking forward to continuing this friendship and really seeing where you go. So thank you again.
We need to have you over here to Tulsa, man. Come on over.
Yeah, I will. You know what? Next time I'm over there, I will be sure to look you up and we can break some bread together or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me on, Bryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, guys, it's been another episode of Dad Up. Just want to thank my good friend again, Blake Brewer, for being on the show. Listen, if there's a way that you want to express how you really feel to your children, you can do it through the legacy letter that Blake just talked about. Go to his website, check it out, sign up for the challenge, and really put down on paper what you want to say to your kids and make them feel special and feel loved. But he's on a mission right now. And so I highly encourage you. I'm going to do it because I think it's great. I'm going to do it for my boys. I just think it's an awesome, awesome thing to do for your kids. And do me a favor. If you want to reach out to Blake or something like that, you have a message for him or a question, please do that because he and his team will get back to you and answer any questions you may have. And as I always say, if you have not yet subscribed to my show, please do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at Dad Up Podcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad Up.